World War I began on June 19th, 1914, when Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated by Siberian nationalists. In retaliation, Austria declared war on Serbia. To defend Serbia, Russia mobilized against Austria, and because Germany was aligned with Austria, they were obligated to invade Russia. And because several European countries had alliances with each other, they entered the war as well. Shortly after the war started, the Germans settled into high ground, dug trenches, and fortified their position. This was called trench warfare. When the French and British attacked, the Germans took cover in their trenches and used machine guns and other artillery to kill thousands of French and British soldiers. Soon after, the French and British dug their own trenches and used the same weapons and strategy to do the same to the Germans. It wasn't long before 450 miles of trench stretched from the coast of Belgium to the border of Switzerland, making the land look like a huge scar. This led to an endless stalemate, primarily because both sides' offense and defense methods were very similar. Life in the trenches was horrible. When the soldiers weren't battling, they suffered from trench foot, which developed from standing in the mud for hours. They also had to deal with the lice they got from the many rats that infested the trenches. Every day the soldiers knew they could be killed by a surprise offensive or shot by snipers. Between the French, British, and Germans lines was an area called No Man's Land. No Man's Land was originally a small town, but after it was caught in the crossfire between the two sides, it was blasted, flattened, and charred beyond belief, and resulted in an empty field. Later in the war, the British perfected tanks. This was the first time tanks were used in a military conflict. The British had sent 49 tanks into battle. However, its main weakness is it can't move faster than 4 miles an hour. The tanks played an extremely important role in the war, mostly because it broke the stalemate between France, Britain, and Germany. By 1918, near the end of the war, France and Britain had produced over 6,000 tanks, while Germany had produced 20. However, Germany learned to deal with the tanks and destroyed more than half of them in just 4 days. Britain and France barely managed to defeat them, with just 8 tanks remaining, but they won the war. Trench warfare hasn't been used since World War I, and due to the conditions, it never will be used again.